Imagine waking up to rain, then waking up the next day to more rain, and the next, and the next. No phone, no electricity, no roof that doesn't leak, no way to check a forecast telling you when it might stop. For early humans, this wasn't a hypothetical, it was simply life. So what actually happened when ancient people get stuck in the rain for days on end? The answer says a lot about how humanity survived and how we became who we are today. Set up a different relationship with weather. Today, rain is an inconvenience. We complain about it ruining a weekend, delaying a flight, or forcing us to grab an umbrella. But for humans living tens of thousands of years ago, extended rain wasn't just uncomfortable. It could be dangerous. It affected food supply, body temperature, shelter, and even survival itself. Archaeologists and anthropologists have spent decades piecing together how early humans handled prolonged bad weather using evidence from cave sites, tool remains, ancient hearths, and comparisons to modern hunter-gatherer societies that still live close to the land today. And what they've found paints a surprisingly detailed picture. Section 1, shelter. Staying dry was survival. The first and most obvious concern during days of heavy rain was shelter. Early humans didn't build houses the way we imagine cavemen in cartoons, sitting idly in a single cave their whole lives. Shelter was often temporary, adaptable, and built specifically to handle changing conditions. In regions with natural caves or rock overhangs, groups would take advantage of the terrain. Since these locations offered natural protection from wind and rain, archaeological sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia show long-term human use of such shelters, with layers of ash, tools, and bones revealing that families returned to the same protected spots again and again, especially during unpredictable weather. But not all environments had caves. In open landscapes, early humans built simple structures using branches, animal hides, and mud, creating basic huts designed to shed water. Evidence from sites like Terra Amata in France suggests early humans were constructing shelters with reinforced frames as far back as hundreds of thousands of years ago, long before recorded history began. During extended rain, groups would often reinforce these shelters, adding extra layers of hide or thatch to prevent leaks, and digging small trenches around the base to redirect water away from where people slept. Section 2. Fire, the center of everything. If shelter kept people dry, fire kept them alive. Maintaining a fire during days of rain was one of the most important and most difficult tasks a group could face. Wet wood doesn't burn easily, so early humans developed strategies to keep fires going even in damp conditions. They stored dry kindling and firewood inside shelters, protected from the elements, often collecting extra wood well before a storm arrived if they sensed changing weather patterns. Fire served multiple purposes beyond warmth. It provided light during dark, overcast days when the sky stayed gray from sunrise to sunset. It allowed food to be cooked, which was especially important since damp conditions could quickly spoil a raw meat or plant matter, and it created a communal gathering point, a psychological anchor that gave people a sense of safety and normalcy during an unpredictable stretch of days. Losing a fire during a prolonged storm could be a serious setback, sometimes forcing a group to attempt fire-starting techniques like friction-based methods using dry tinder, which required patience, skill, and no small amount of frustration. Section 3. Food, planning ahead. Extended rain could disrupt hunting and foraging. Animals often take shelter during storms. Tracks become washed out and visibility drops. Fresh plant foraging becomes harder when trails flood or become slippery and dangerous. Because of this, early humans developed food storage strategies long before agriculture existed. Meat could be smoked or dried near a fire to preserve it for days when fresh hunting wasn't possible. Nuts, seeds, and roots were gathered in advance and stored in dry containers made from hide, bark, or woven plant fiber. Evidence from various prehistoric sites shows early humans practicing seasonal food storage, especially in regions with predictable rainy seasons. Groups living in monsoon-affected areas of Africa and Asia, for example, likely developed routines for stockpiling food ahead of extended wet periods, allowing them to wait out bad weather without going hungry. If food supplies ran low during a long storm, groups sometimes relied on foods requiring less immediate freshness.
Things like nuts, tubers, or previously dried meats, since these could be eaten even several days after being gathered or prepared.
Section 4. Tool making and downtime. Rainy days weren't only about survival tasks. They were also, in a strange way, some of the most productive periods for early human innovation. With hunting and foraging temporarily limited, groups had extra time on their hands, and archaeological evidence suggests this downtime was often used for tool making and maintenance. Stone tools required significant time and skill to produce, and rainy days sheltered inside a cave or hut may have provided ideal conditions for this detailed, seated work. Bone needles, spear points, scrapers, and other tools found at prehistoric sites show signs of careful craftsmanship that would have taken hours of focused effort, the kind of time that's hard to find when you're constantly hunting, foraging, or traveling. Extended bad weather may have given early humans exactly that kind of uninterrupted time. This idea is supported by research into modern hunter-gatherer societies, where anthropologists have observed that rainy or unproductive weather often shifts group activity toward tasks like tool repair, clothing maintenance, and craft work, suggesting a pattern that likely stretches back tens of thousands of years. Section 5. Social bonding and storytelling. Perhaps the most fascinating part of this story isn't practical survival, it's social behavior. Being confined to a shelter for days at a time meant early humans spent long stretches of time in close proximity to each other with limited external distractions. Anthropologists believe this environment likely encouraged storytelling, one of humanity's oldest traditions. Long before written language, oral storytelling served as a way to pass down knowledge, warn of dangers, explain natural phenomena, and simply pass the time. Rainy days, forcing groups into shared shelters, may have been prime conditions for these storytelling traditions to develop and strengthen. Some researchers argue that these extended indoor periods also played a role in strengthening social bonds within groups. Sitting together near a fire, sharing food, telling stories, and completing tasks side by side likely reinforced cooperation and trust traits that were essential for group survival in a world full of external threats. There's also reason to believe music and rhythm-based activities may have emerged, at least in part, from these confined social settings. Simple percussion using sticks, stones, or hollowed materials could have provided both entertainment and a shared communal experience during otherwise unproductive days. Section 6. Children and learning for children in early human groups. Rainy days confined to shelter likely served an important educational purpose. With adults nearby and less pressure to actively hunt or forage, elders may have used this time to teach skills tool making, food preparation, or basic survival knowledge, passing down information critical for a child's future survival. This kind of concentrated teaching time is something modern hunter-gatherer societies still exhibit today, with rainy or low activity periods often associated with increased teaching and skill demonstration between generations. Section 7. When rain became dangerous. Of course, not every prolonged rainy period was simply an inconvenient but manageable event. Extended storms could bring serious danger. Flooding threatened low-lying shelters and camps near rivers or streams. Persistent dampness increased the risk of illness, particularly for very young or elderly group members, and extended cold, wet conditions without adequate shelter or fire could lead to hypothermia, a very real threat, even in relatively temperate climates. Because of this, early humans likely developed a strong understanding of local weather patterns over generations, learning to recognize warning signs and choosing camp locations that offered natural protection from flooding or exposure. This kind of environmental knowledge, passed down through direct experience and oral tradition, was just as critical to survival as any physical tool. So what did ancient humans actually do when it rained for days on end? They adapted, they reinforced shelters, protected their fires, planned ahead for food shortages, used the downtime to craft tools, and perhaps most importantly, they leaned into each other. Storytelling, teaching, and social bonding weren't just ways to pass the time. They were survival strategies in their own right, strengthening the cooperation and knowledge sharing that allowed early human groups to endure. The next time you're stuck inside during a long rainy stretch, feeling bored or restless, remember humans have been doing exactly this for hundreds of thousands of years. Long before television, books, or phones, our ancestors turned rainy days into moments of connection, creativity, and quiet resilience. In a strange way, waiting out the rain might be one of the oldest shared human experiences there is.